All right, I got my good friend Dr. Mark Atkinson on the show today. He's an integrative medicine doctor, human potential teacher, breathwork instructor, internationally recognized authority on optimal health and self-actualization. He's the co-founder of the School of Biohacking. He's the former medical director of Bulletproof. That's how I first met him. He was my coach, and he's a well acclaimed author of the Mind Body Bible, Holistic Health Secrets for Women and True Happiness. Dr. Mark, welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah, it's really good to be here, Joel, and I love connecting with you. And we're going to have a really good conversation about something super important.
Yeah, I'm excited. So you just launched a new program recently called the School of Biohacking.
Yeah.
And one of the things interesting, and you've been in the biohacking space for a long time. I mean, obviously, like you worked
Mhm.
for the godfather, as they would say, of biohacking, Dave
That's right.
Asprey, and you're one of his leaders and pioneering the Human Potential Institute and a lot of the coaching programs there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, and biohacking has evolved and changed over the last
Hmm.
decade. Man, it's evolved so much. But now you've coined a new term, biohacking 3.0.
That's
What
right.
was the impetus for this? And what did you really feel like, man, this is something we need to bring to the world?
Yeah. Well, as you just shared, I worked alongside Dave Asprey for a whole bunch of time, and so I really got to understand 2.0, which really is about performance and just fantastic. And what I love and appreciate about biohackers is their kind of proactive can-do attitude, right? But I understand the field really well, and I know a lot of biohackers. And what I saw is many of them are getting stuck, right? They're kind of bumping up against certain limitations, and it tends to be around how they use their mind, relate to their emotions, and work with their relationships. And so 3.0 really came in response to the kind of, in my mind, the obviousness to evolve the field to expand its focus from me, performance, aesthetics, to mental and emotional health, to relationships, to impact, to what I will call thriving. And actually, Dave said recently on one of his Instagram posts that he felt biohacking was evolving to focus much more on consciousness expansion and longevity. So there's a whole bunch of us in this space, perhaps by virtue of our own inner development as we kind of mature, work through life's challenges, all that kind of stuff, realize, boy, is like biohacking has so much potential because it really is about empowerment, taking charge, dialing in your routines, your environment, your body to give you capacity and energy and resilience. But then the question is, what will you do with that? How will you deploy that in the world? Who will you become? What impact will you have? And really, that is where 3.0 kicks in.
Yeah, so good. And I can totally relate to everything you're saying because when I got into biohacking, a decade ago, I was just so fascinated with the body and how you could and heal things, and that's how I stumbled upon Dave's podcast, and I was just blown away because I was a very big into health and fitness, but I never had heard about some of these therapies and modalities he was talking about, and it really changed my life, and I was evolving in many ways. But the thing that I found was on a consciousness level, I wasn't evolving. Okay. I was
Right.
stuck, like you're exactly like you're saying.
Yeah.
And one of the things, just to share personally, is that my marriage my relationship with my kids was just atrocious. And I was biohacking my life away, Dr. Mark. I mean, I was in great shape and my business and my health and wealth, everything was dialed in, but not my marriage and relationships. It was atrocious. And I don't know if you remember, but I reached out probably, I don't know, 6 months ago. And I sent you an email. I said, hey, thank you, because
Mm.
one of the things I did when I went back and fixed my marriage, which is awesome now, and my kids' relationship with my kids is awesome, is I went back into some of our early trainings with the Human Potential Institute. And then there was a second course that you had done, which was probably even biohacking 2. That was 1.0. 2.0 was the psychological fitness training.
That's
And I
right.
went back through a lot of those exercises, but I really
Mm.
embodied them. I didn't just read them in a book
Great.
and just like, give it lip service. I actually embodied them and I saw my life start to change. So I reached back out to you and I wanted to thank you personally because I saw the change that I had in my own life. So
Yeah.
now, so now I know exactly what you're talking about. So people are listening. There you go. That's probably what you're talking about. And now you've got a 3.0 version, which is really, really neat.
Yeah, it is. The 3.0 really integrates and organizes and provides a framework for human thriving, right? Yeah, and you can think of it this way. So, when I look at the world and I look at the health and thriving and happiness, I see it through a couple of lenses. One is an integral model. I just naturally see the whole, right? So rather than, which is very tempting for all of us to zoom in to nuance and detail prematurely, I kind of naturally just get the whole, right? I see the big picture. And then I got the functional medicine approach, which is root cause orientated, which is great. Then I got the biohacking approach, which is simply based on the principle of modifying your condition of your internal and external world to support thriving or the outcome you want, right? And when you kind of meld all those together, you actually have a very practical framework for kind of bringing out the best of yourself. And ultimately, that is what it's about. Is like, we all know there's a version of us that we like and appreciate, and sometimes we experience that showing up and it feels good and it feels right, and the world appreciates it when it shows up. But often there's a version that isn't so pretty, isn't so good, isn't so healthy, right? And so a lot of the movement towards 3.0 actually requires a lot of courage, because it requires us to acknowledge the things that aren't working in our life. It requires us to acknowledge the fact that we're struggling in certain domains and aspects of our life, and that we have to face them, work with them, and that is what we call the shadow. And within the shadow is always the gift.
Talk about okay, that's so good, so good, good. Talk about just I know you have like the 5 pillars of thriving, and I think on your website, the School of
Right.
Biohacking, I think people there's like a free download or something like
Yeah,
that.
there
I
is.
think
Yeah,
they
yeah.
get like
There's
a
a free
workshop.
webinar, Thrive Essentials. I kind of give the basic framework in that.
Yeah, what's kind of like the mind blowing secret with there that you could just say that if someone's looking just to
Yeah.
transform, and I mean, we've already kind of dove into it, but if they're looking to just transform their health or performance just overnight, like what are some of the big takeaways that you would distill from that?
Yeah, I think it starts with good self care, and good self care starts with caring about your body and caring about yourself and caring about life, right? So sometimes people who kind of say they do self care, it's not coming from a caring place, right? It's coming from a kind of quite harsh or rejecting place. There's a harshness around it. So I think the first thing is actually to really develop the capacity to care deeply. And to do that, you have to have conscious contact with your heart, right?
Mm.
And that's where the kind of deeper work is. So that's the first thing, is just genuinely get to a place of caring. And there really is a process for that. It's not something you can just switch on. It's not just a capacity that you can open up to. What I would say is, and here's the big thing that we really teach in School of Biohacking, is that who you take yourself to be, the kind of thought-based separate entity that you operate and experience life through, is simply not who you are. And beneath and beyond that is your thriving core, at the heart of which are a lot of the qualities you seek in life, whether it's joy, connection, love, etc. So I like to kind of frame it this way, which is life is a process and journey of transformation. When you engage with that process, we call that the process of self-actualization. It's a natural, innate process built within us that is moving us towards higher levels of integrity, wholeness, and integration. When you wise up to the fact that that is happening, and you learn how to be in tune with it. But to be in tune with it, you have to stop medicating and distracting yourself. You have to get in your body, and you have to learn how to start welcoming what's showing up in the body, which means bring kindness to what is showing up, self-kindness. That for me is the most important starting place, because if you dial that bit in, the self-kindness, and you have a willingness to get honest and real about your struggles and your challenges, and to get the help and support and guidance to navigate that from a foundational place of self honesty and self kindness, get in touch with the self actualization impulse. And you'll just mysteriously be moved to do certain things, read certain things, listen to certain teachers. There's an intelligence about the whole kind of thing. So I think that's the kind of starting place. And then from there, it's just really good self care. And self care is not just about taking care of the body, that is the starting place. So I mean, nutrition, movement, exercise, sleep, supplements, all the fun stuff that you and I could spend a lot of time talking about. Equally important is psychological self care, right? And so the Human Givens Institute here in the UK have kind of, really done a fantastic job of identifying core psychological needs that we all have. And that could be to give and receive positive attention, right? To have a sense of meaning and purpose, to feel competent as a human being and appreciated by others, to feel and belong to part of a community. So we need to be working in equal amounts on meeting our physical needs and our psychological needs in balance. That's self care. It's really at the foundation of what I teach. And the next 4 levels and layers beyond it are where it starts to get exciting. Most biohackers jump to layer 2, which is self optimization. You've got to
Yeah.
dial in self care first, my friend, before you want to optimize.
By the way, did you have your own, like I told you my story about just my marriage and shambles and stuff, but
Yes,
did you have your own kind of aha moment where, cuz again, you and
yes,
I are very similar, like you're a high performer, you're a doctor, like you
right,
did all the stuff. You worked for Dave, like you did everything, but
yes,
did you kind of have this same aha moment like, man, I'm fighting and I'm successful, I'm doing all the things, but I just don't feel complete. I don't feel self-actualized. I don't feel like I've
yes.
actually made it. Like the world's still empty.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, let's have fun and unpack this part of Dr. Mark. Okay, people love hearing
We're getting
about
raw
it,
here.
and actually, I really enjoy speaking about it because it is really important to appreciate that when you're in the presence of people who are high functioning, conscious, and healthy, etc., they typically have been on a very challenging journey to get to that place. And that was absolutely 100% the case for me. So we must talk about the difficulties and the challenges and the heartbreak and the pain. We must talk about that because it's for a lot of people actually the gateway through which transformation happens. So for me, it happened about 20 years ago. And at that time, I was on TV here in the UK. It was pretty well known. I was on the kind of early morning breakfast show as the holistic medical doctor guy. So, anytime there was a health feature, they'd get the conventional doctor to talk about the allopathic approach and then me to talk about, the kind of functional integrative approach. And I loved it. And it was fantastic. But what was fascinating at that time was it coincided with the emergence of a lot of emotional pain that I could not figure out what the cause of it was. And it would look like this. So I would arrive about 4:30 in the morning to do this kind of TV show. And I would walk into the TV studio and be overwhelmed by the sense of sadness and grief. And it was just like flooding up inside of me. And often I would have to go into the washroom. I would have these tears and feel this pain and this grief. Shift state, go out, perform, get back home and cry. And I had no idea why this was happening. Then I was doing a lot of tours. So giving talks to large audiences, same thing. Before I went on, would cry, come back home, cry. But in the moment of teaching and doing what I was, fantastic, dialed in, all kind of good. And what started to happen was that what are called the exiled parts of me. So internal family systems is a beautiful, elegant, accurate framework of how the human psyche is structured. We each have these repressed or exiled parts or shadow parts that ultimately seek to be known, welcomed, and integrated. And these parts were coming up, and it became very disabling. And where it got to was a stage where I struggled to be in touch with any sense of inner confidence. I felt like a bit of a phony when I was out there. I was kind of really worried that people could kind of see through me, right? Um, and then it got to a stage where I remember someone saying to me, "Hey, Mark, I think you've got a problem with alcohol. I've kind of seen how you are around. I got a lot of friends who struggle with alcohol, and of course, I denied it. Kind of belittled it, rationalized that they were correct. So what was going on was, and for quite some time, I'd been self-medicating this pain through an obsessive focus on the external by soothing myself through distraction and alcohol and other means. And basically, where I got to was I was sent to a therapist who said, "You, my friend, need to get into a treatment center to get the help and support that you need so that you can recover. And if you do
Wow.
this, and it requires real courage and humility to admit that you need help, it will transform your life." And it did. So I went into treatment for a month in America, and and it was the first time in my life I asked for help, admitted I did not know what to do, and from that place of what felt like brokenness, and now I see humility, that was when I really got in touch with this desire to get real, to figure out how to be a healthy, good human being, and to come from a very sincere place. And that really initiated my kind of journey into all of this. And so my teachings reflect that process as to what I learned along the way. And of course, what I've learned from helping hundreds, thousands of others also go through their journey as well. Because for a lot of us, there comes a time, particularly in midlife, when our world apparently falls apart. We cannot cope, cannot deal with what's in front of us. And if we allow ourselves to be impacted and transformed by that, it can have a profound impact on the way we experience life. And it can be actually transitioned to the second stage of life, which is so much more fulfilling, so full of blessings, and not rooted in pretense, not rooted in the need to know and control. It's more a state of active surrender, engaging with reality, willing to do the work, while simultaneously, and I know you know this because I've told it to you, letting go, right? And so in a way, these five pillars of thriving are what I'm bringing back to the world. Is like I've been on a 20-year journey. I was headed in that direction. Life took me that direction. I eventually started cooperating with the intelligence and impulse of life. And here's what I've discovered. It's incomplete. It's imperfect, but it's super practical. It's grounded in reality, and a lot of people are finding it very helpful. So that's what I'm bringing to the world.
It's so good. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that all about you. And one of the things I now just remembered a conversation we had a while back was when I was telling you my own struggles and where I was stuck at this level. And I think at the time you had said, yeah, that's like a level 2 kind of consciousness. And you were
Yes.
trying to go to level 3, Joel. But
Mm,
all like the way I had got from level 1 to level 2
mm,
was that I just worked my ass off
yeah,
and I willed it. I woke up
me
early. I
too.
did the cold plunges. I was a go getter, and I go go go. And I tried to. That's how I tried to do my marriage and tried to do everything. Like, well, I'll just fix it. And I was telling you, I go, but you know what? I did that for years. I'm a high performer and kind of guy, and it never worked. And you go,
Mm,
yeah, because you were trying to go to level 3, and the only way to level 3 is through active surrender.
that's right.
and that is what I ended up doing. I mean, I was broken, man. I couldn't figure it out,
Yeah,
and it's so interesting now to look back at it. It's very clear. Yeah, that's where I was at. And
exactly.
then that was how I moved to that next level. But there's more levels beyond that. And I don't know where I'll
Yes,
go.
there are.
We'll see how far I can go. But even and that's why hiring teachers and working with people like yourself is so valuable. People that have done it, right? And been there and see it.
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah,
like now I
we,
can see it so clearly, right? But you saw it
yeah.
like miles away. Right.
Everyone has to get a mentor. You
Yeah.
can't do it by yourself. And actually, it's one of the hallmarks that if you convince yourself you can do it by yourself, that is actually a red flag, right? Which is, and basically what you're speaking to there is part of what we teach is a 5-stage model of human development. Um, and where a lot of people are at is in what we call victor consciousness, right? And that's all about control. And it's fantastic. It's an essential developmental stage where we learn that we can positively influence the way we feel, our health, our relationships, our success in life by taking control. It's just
Yep. That's where
fantastic.
I
It's
was at.
essential.
Yep.
But there comes a time in your development kind of process where that will start to fail in a particular domain of life. Okay. And typically it's relationships, right? It could be somewhere else, but typically it's relationships. And it's just like you double down on control, and the whole thing just gets worse. Okay. So the question is there an alternative way of being and doing life that will continue to bring me the things that matter, my health, my vitality, but actually will help nurture my relationships and actually maybe develop me spiritually as a human being? And the answer is yes. It's called active surrender. And active surrender is rooted in the knowledge that you're not in charge. Life's in charge, right? Life is the intelligent unfolding of the whole of which we are a part and aspect. It's in charge. We can learn to align with it, live in harmony with it. And there are some simple foundational practices for that, and we can allow ourselves to be transformed by it. This typically is when the spiritual kind of search kind of kicks in, or the search for meaning, the search for depth, the search for authenticity, right? Now, what we don't want to do is apply a stage two approach to that, which is try to grasp and own and understand. It's got to be non-cognitive, right? Which is you got to let go of certainty. Like, the journey through active surrender is actually unlearning, unknowing, and being deeply okay with not knowing and being okay with that, right? There's a lot of humility is required. And the moment you reckon you got it figured out, you got to let go of that. It's a constant process of opening and letting go, opening, letting go. And basically you move into a very receptive state of being. And when you move into that deep state of receptivity, you start to notice it kind of feels like life is living through me. We call this vessel consciousness, right? There's an intelligence orchestrating the whole thing. It's kind of living through me. Sometimes I fight that and resist it with consequence. But when I align with it, I enter into this kind of state of conscious flow, which is I'm present, I'm engaged, I'm open, I'm kind of much more interested in what is emerging and unfolding versus meeting my agenda, winning the moment, right? That's a stage kind of two thing, right? And so when you start to live from this deeper sense of flow, life feels so much better. And regardless of how difficult life can be, and it will continue to be difficult, you can simultaneously access a much deeper sense of well-being and wisdom and clarity and ease and joyfulness, and it's pretty much always there. But it requires courage, humility, and you've got to do your inner work and inner healing. And if you do not do your inner work and inner healing, you ain't going to come over to stage three, my friend. That's the kind of golden rule. And that is where I see a whole bunch of biohackers are stuck. That is why we've created Biohacking 3.0 to tell them what they can do to help themselves to participate in this natural process of transformation.
Yeah. So, so good. I wanted to ask you because one of the big things that I see, even currently in my own life, and, again, someone like you, high performer, entrepreneur, speaker, author, you're doing a lot. What is like just one practice that you do on a regular basis to stay consistent? Because
Mm,
it's so easy, like we were just talking about, but it's so easy just to go back into stage two. It's so easy. And we all get
yes,
trapped into these
definitely.
traps. Is there anything like, do you do meditation in the morning? Do you do like visualization, or yeah, is there anything that you like to
Mm.
do to kind of ground yourself and remind yourself, yeah, like this is who I want to be, and build those resilient strategies in your life?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You have to fundamentally reshape your routines and patterns. And they kind of extend beyond just physical self-care. So of course I work out, my nutrition is dialed in, my sleep is excellent. They are just the fundamentals and necessities. But my morning routine is up at 5. I do Sadhguru Hatha Yoga, Shambhavi Mahamudra. I meditate. That really is my kind of grounding place, right? And then the other really important thing, as simple as this sounds, is particularly when you move to vessel consciousness and you're in flow a lot more, is you get real kind of honest about what am I still holding on to, right? What needs to be released? I just kind of do a check in. And it's just like scan, the domains of my life. Where's my fear? Where's my worry? Right? This is really important. Sounds small. It's really important. And you just acknowledge it. You know what? About that, I have some fear. But you just welcome it. It just flows. It's not a problem. So you're kind of grounding yourself in what is true. You're having a much more kind of honest relationship. So being really honest in my relationship with my wife, for example, right? Which is not being the default positive guy, right? Kind of just a little bit elevated above reality. Kind of just coming in is just like actually just being real, right? Just being real and really learning to listen deeply. So relationship as practice is probably my main thing now, which is what I came to realize. And this really isn't a surprise for anyone who knows what healthy relationships looks like, is the best ideas come about through conversation. I used to kind of think the best ideas were the ones I had, and it was just a case of convincing others that those are the best ideas. Well, turns out, my friend, that actually in a partnership, a true partnership, where you're coming alongside of each other, the real best ideas come through collaboration and through creativity and through figuring things out together. Um, and then using relational intimacy as a spiritual pathway, right? And so just really watching out for when I get triggered and activated, right? Which does happen sometimes under certain situations, acknowledging, oh, I've been activated and triggered here, and then I have a process or many processes for integrating that charge, right? So I can say life is practice, watching out for when I get triggered and activated and spin out, right, into some kind of reactivity, regrounding myself when I have the time to revisit it and process it. That's really important. I have a couple of mentors and therapists I check in with regularly. That's just awesome because that kind of gives you protected time and space to actually get in touch with stuff you didn't know was there because you were too busy, and I was so busy and distracted from other stuff. I didn't even know this stuff was there. Right.
Yeah.
So having a support team around me is important. But I really think relationships are my deeper practice now, which is just when I'm with my children, particularly, and of course my wife and others. It's just being deeply present to them and just really enjoying their presence, enjoying the process of kind of being with them is just been a game changer.
So good. It's so good, and I love like how um your morning routine to kind of again prime your body and get you in that focused higher being, a higher conscious of who you want to
Mm.
show up and be. But then, like you said, life is practice. It's you can be in your own little
Oh
world
yes,
meditating all day long. Now try doing those things with your kids. Now try doing those things with your
100%.
wife when
Yes.
it's a little bit different, right? But it's so good. One of my goals right now is to be more silly and playful with my kids because
Great.
I'm not that way. I'm just not
Yeah.
that way.
Got it.
And there was a time, obviously, I think about, when I was a kid, I was silly and playful, but that probably just got beaten out of me. Like be
Yeah.
be you got to be strong, Joel, and do all these things, and I toughened up, right?
Mm.
And my kids are just so great and silly and playful, but I'm not that way, and
Yeah.
I don't bring that energy, and it's such a good energy. And so, like you're
Yeah.
talking about, there's this, but I'm missing out by not being that way. And so, for me to
Yeah.
be
For sure.
deeply connected with them, that's what I'm trying to work towards.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, children reflect back to us our non-integrated parts, right? So that's reality, little mirrors,
Yeah.
and they embody playfulness and curiosity and spontaneity, all of these things that are actually hallmarks of a well-functioning mind. So for people like us who have come through maybe challenging times for whatever reason, there tends to be kind of quite a lot of rigidity and control.
Yep.
Okay, and where we want to get to is a joyful, playful spirit. And
Yeah.
what I've seen is that as we progress in a pathway as human beings, there's much more joyfulness and playfulness there, and capacity to shift, right? So shift gears. So be present and serious and engaged because that's what's being asked at the present moment. But then to be able to shift, and I think a lot of this is about being able to flexibly shift state according to the needs of the present moment, right? So there's a time for all of this, and cultivating that capacity to be playful is really really important. Where I learned to be playful was one because I had children. Two is I read a book called Playful Parenting because it was so not my style. So like you, I thought, oh wow, because my natural way to shape behavior was of course through control. Well, that ain't never going to work, my friend. You try it, but
Yeah.
of course it doesn't work. And what I learned is, and in all relationships, you come alongside people. You don't come at them, right? If you come at a child with your voice, your tone, your energy, that will spontaneously activate the defense mechanisms. So you enter into their world, you become curious about the world, you take a moment, a couple of minutes to enter into the world, play alongside of them, and from that place of resonant connection, then you kind of go to the next step. And that requires patience and planning. And there was a little tip that was I always share this when I can with parents, which is when you know that moment where you gotta go and your child does not want to go. Right? They're having too much fun. Um, and so I was told this phrase. You asked this phrase is basically, do you want to go now or in 2 minutes time? And you give them the kind of illusion of choice, right? And they always choose 2 minutes, of course.
Yeah.
And then the miracle is, now it doesn't happen every time, but 2 minutes comes. Okay, time to go. Let's do it. And so there's this just skillful, conscious, attuned ways of working in relationship that are transformational. But it requires humility. And what I appreciate about you, Joel, is that you're up for it. And that is kind of like a bit of a biohacker's mindset, which is here is an issue. How am I going to solve the issue? And sometimes how we solve the issue is by changing the way we approach it and the vibe with which we approach it and learning to be playful. The other place I learned playfulness was in five rhythms, right? It's a form of ecstatic kind of dance. And I was a self conscious kind of dancer, but there you'll learn, oh my gosh, the body knows how to move in response to music when it's given free expression to do that. And then that's where I really got touched in a very primal kind of core way, this kind of playfulness, this flexibility and ease that was non self conscious. So there's all of these different practices that we can explore that can really help.
So good. So good. All right, let's shift gears here. I want to go now. Let's talk about a little of the biohacking because people want to
Right.
know how do we optimize our health? And let's
Yeah.
face it, at the end of the day, I always say this famous quote, a healthy person has as many wishes as they want. An unhealthy
Yeah.
person only has one, and that's to be healthy. And we were talking about
Yeah.
my mom and her recent diagnosis of cancer offline.
Yeah.
And it's like you just see like death is coming. And I don't want that for anybody. I want to live as
Yeah.
long as I can and build a legacy. And that's why I think why, people are coming through the School of Biohacking. That's a big fear is death and wanting to live not just an okay life, but wanting to
Mm.
live a phenomenal life. And if you're going to die at 100, fine, but I want to go out feeling good doing it, right?
Right on.
So I'm just curious, you have a whole module on just longevity and reversing
Mm.
aging with these senolytic therapies, and there's a lot of
Mm.
new exciting things,
Mm.
NAD and all these
Mm.
things. What's most exciting you in the longevity space and all the research and everything that you've been doing? And can
Mm.
people actually, start
Mm.
reversing their age slowly?
Yeah, there's no doubt that we can control and influence both our rate of aging and through kind of core lifestyle changes, for sure, prolong the likelihood of us living, longer, many more years in better health. For sure, that's just a given. And really, I think once you've got the self care in place, then we're ready to optimizations, right?
Yeah.
And I think the exciting thing for us in the kind of longevity space is that the pace of change is unbelievable, right? What we're seeing in terms of one, AI being able to process our data and then gives us personalized information. I think that is going to be a key part of this, which is how we personalize our nutrition, our lifestyle, our meditation, our inner development practices according to genetics, epigenetics, and kind of real time kind of data. So that personalization, I think, is super important. I think there's going to come a time where we're going to be able to regenerate most organs and have them available to us so that, when you get into 70s, 80s, etc., you'll be able to access and have your either organs repaired through stem cells or actually have implants replaced. So I think we're going to see a lot of kind of evolvement in regenerative medicine. Stem cells are, of course, a super, super exciting kind of place right now. In terms of kind of supplements, what I say to people with that is, of course, the NAD plus supplements are super exciting. Metformin is kind of very popular. But let's just make sure, one of the challenges with supplements is to continue to benefit from, you got to take it all the time. So before you kind of jump for the spermidine or whatever it is, you're going to take it for the rest of your life. What's the cost of that? Think through it. So it doesn't mean we don't do these things, but we have to kind of we have to focus on the things that have weighted evidence for their impact. And so that would be calorie restriction, time restricted kind of eating. Of course, exercise is the massive one. Certain biohackers aren't so keen to exercise so much. It's pretty important for most of us. How we exercise, the type of exercise, of course, is genetically kind of influence. So I think we've really got to dial in the fundamentals and then look at supplementation, and then just make sure with the supplementation that, of course, it's high quality and that we have a clear rationale for taking them. And are we clear? Are we just going to take it for 2 months and then stop? What was the point in doing that then? Right? Because if there's no carried on benefit thereafter, there was no point taking them in the first place. So having a much more kind of conscious relationship to it. And then I think what is really important is, so we want to live longer, great. But we also want to live with more joy, right? So let's also be simultaneously working on our joy, which is, programming exciting, fun, joyful things to do throughout the week. Let's also make sure that we've done the inner work so that we can access a more joyful internal sense of self, right? And so that's the inner kind of mastery work. We can access the course. There's more joyfulness there because we know happy, joyful people live longer. They enjoy their life so much more. And so I think working on joy, kind of the health foundations need to be in place. And then you got your kind of optimizations. And supplements are a big part of that. And I think you got to go for low hanging fruit, which is you got to make sure that, you're on a high quality, ideally whole food originated multivitamin mineral, that you got your vitamin D3, K2 kind of dialed in and optimized, your omega 3s are dialed in, etc. But then just have a clear, conscious rationale for taking the supplements that you're taking.
Yeah. Such a good answer. And I know, I'm sure everybody wants to hear, Dr. Mark, just tell me that I should be taking NAD or whatever it is. But the truth
Yeah,
of the matter is,
love
I'm
your
sure in
name.
your practice, you had many thousands and thousands of people that came to you and they were taking curcumin and they were taking every supplement. They probably had like a list of 100 supplements and they were still sick.
Yeah, right.
And I'm
Or
sure,
not happy.
yeah. And I'm sure, but for a lot of us too, right? These people are plagued with toxins that, they're just, they have gut dysbiosis, heavy metals, environmental
There
toxins.
you go.
And so it's like, if we're trying to build, I always tell people, you want to just optimize, you want to go straight to the optimization because it's sexy and fun. But none of that really matters when your foundation is weak. It's like, you want this Ferrari, but you got a Toyota engine. It's like, doesn't you gotta detox first. You gotta remove the or like as Bruce Lee says, there's that famous quote. Sometimes we have to subtract, right? Instead of adding on more things.
You got to, so Dave would say, you got to remove your kryptonite, right? So it's like, what are the things within you and around you that are habitually undermining your health, vitality, longevity? Most of us have a whole bunch of stuff that's going on. You got to know what's going on with your hormones. You got to know what's going on with your gut. Obviously, as you know, um, mold exposure, mold toxin exposure is massive. How many people live in water damaged buildings and are being impacted by the amount of mold? If you live in a moldy environment, typically, if you can, you got to get out and then you have to rehabilitate. And, or if you are going to have it mitigated, it has to be done properly and effectively. So we really got to think through all these kind of things. The number of people with heavy metals, right? There's still a lot of people with mercury amalgam fillings, right? And so, they want to live and optimize their life. Well, my friend, the first place to start with is with your mercury amalgam fillings, but don't just have them out by any dentist. Your dentist has to know the protocol to mitigate the likelihood that when they remove them, that it don't release a whole bunch of mercury into you, right? And you got to be prepared. You got to be in glutathione and all of the kind of antioxidants beforehand, and it's got to be staged and planned. And so it really is. If anyone's listening to this and they struggle with symptoms, they haven't got on top, where their energy is not where they want it to be, the mood is not where it wants to be. The general rule of thumb is you got to do some root cause analysis, and generally you got to find someone who can support you in that. That's where the testing kind of comes in. And because it's when you deal with the root causes, does then the functioning of our whole system, body mind system, then upregulate, and then it provides you with the consistent energy, the lightness of being, the positive mood. How many times have I seen people who are depressed, right? And so the conventional doctor says antidepressants, CBT. I said, no, hold it a sec. There's many reasons why people are depressed. Sometimes it is to do with post-traumatic stress disorder and emotional trauma, for sure, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a function of nutritional insufficiencies, deficiencies. It's a reaction to the food they're having. It's their thyroid hormones are imbalanced. It's their DHEA and cortisol levels are too low or cortisol too high. So let's take a look. Let's dive a little kind of deeper. And so I think taking responsibility for your health is, I'm responsible for my health. Number one, that in itself is a massive kind of step forward. Two is, what's getting in the way of my body being healthy? And if I can't figure it out myself, who can I go to help me? And what in their training gives them the big picture and the depth to help do that? And the general principle is, these days, you want someone who has an understanding of the functional medicine framework, which is to kind of look for root causes. And as a general rule of thumb, you start by looking in your mouth, what's going on there. Then you work your way down into the gut, right? You got to do some bloodline base bloods. So you want to know what's going on with your inflammation, your lipoproteins, your hormones, your liver function, your kidney function. You want to go check all that out, your blood sugars. You got to check all of that out. A lot of people may feel okay, and yet we know that the precursor for cardiac events and strokes and dementia, well, it kind of happens 30 to 40 years prior to a significant symptom. So, as a golden rule of thumb, is that you need data and information, and you need to know what you're looking for. The worst thing people can do is go to their general practitioner. They do a very restricted panel of bloods, and the doctor says, there's nothing wrong. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. Now, what you're saying is, with the test that you tested for, there was nothing that was deviating from the normal range you were using. But if I look at it through the optimal range, I might see something. And we need to expand what you're testing for to look for the kind of real issues. So it is very complex. And I really feel for people with chronic ill health who are struggling to get the help that they need, because it's very, very common.
Yeah. Are students coming through this new course, the School of Biohacking? You went
Mm.
into really some root causal deep stuff, and you're a medically trained doctor, so you
Yeah.
have years and years and years of decades of experience, so it's quite
Yeah.
different. But are they going to be given some of that knowledge too, to kind of like look at this lens from a little bit more of a root causal, or at least be able to recommend for their clients, like, hey, run
Yeah.
into these
Recommend.
labs and stuff? Because you
Yes.
know what I'm seeing is mycotoxin looks to be like basically mycotoxin toxicity. And sure, I could give you NAD plus, and I could give you
Yeah.
glutathione, and
Yeah.
yeah, you probably feel better for a while, but we're not going to get to the root cause, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So this is where the boundaries are, right? So, one thing that I'm really kind of dialed in is, what is the boundaries of a biohacking instructor or coach? What can they do? So, firstly, is like, we're focused on positive outcomes. So that would be cognitive performance, it could be energy, it could be healthy longevity. But when you come through the training, we will focus on is what can get in the way of that. How would you know if that was a thing? And then who or what would you need to do to help your client mitigate that?
Yeah.
So you're not doing it from the, oh, I'm here as a functional medicine doctor and I'm going to that kind of detail. No, you don't have the training for that. We have
Yeah.
people from all different kind of depths and academic backgrounds, but you will have an awareness of, say, for example, energy, maybe the top 10 things that typically get in the way of someone feeling vital. some of those, you can actually guide your clients to get the test, and the test will give them the answer and the interpretation of that. So you can tell them where to go, right? And then you can educate them around on the different things they can do to help themselves. So, typically, if someone's tired, you may want to check their iron. That's a good place to start. You may want to check the thyroid. So you could just say, hey, either go to this place to get these kind of bloods done. They'll interpret for them. They'll probably come back with a whole bunch of fantastic recommendations. You can use that, and I can support you in the implementation and help prioritize them.
Nice. Yeah, love that. On the realm of biohacking, is there any wearables or anything that you have experimented in the last decade of doing this stuff? But
Mm,
anything that you're really keen on now? I mean, there are so many things
yeah.
for like neurofeedback and like frequency stuff, and then there's the
Yes.
CGMs and all these heart
Yeah.
rate stuff. What do you like right now, or what are you seeing that's been pretty effective?
Yeah. Right. Well, the two that I use most are Sensei, which is a 5-in-1 neurofeedback headset. That's been a bit of a game changer. And to be upfront, I'm involved with them as one of their medical advisors. But the reason I advise to them is because I love their product. And I help to kind of design the meditations that accompany it, and it integrates neurofeedback, photo biomodulation, binaural beats, heart coherence. It basically stacked all of the things that I love. And neurofeedback has been such an important part of my own inner development journey. So that's fantastic because it kind of takes the individual on a journey, and it really starts with training focused attention, then train the next level, which is open awareness, and then learning how to bring a more heart-centered kindness to that, and then moving on to the more transpersonal states where you access stillness and joy and bliss. So that is very dialed in and super exciting. The other thing I've started to use a lot of that is just very practical is, my desk is a stand-up desk, and I have a walking treadmill, and I use the walking treadmill a lot. And this is a very kind of simple thing, but when you think about how much kind of sitting down a lot of people typically do, integrating that into my kind of daily routine is really important. I use an aura ring, of course, from time to time. I use a continuous glucose meter. That's very good when I start to forget how my nutrition impacts my energy, right? When it's just a real reminder, is like to get even more conscious around what you eat, how you eat, when you eat. One of the things I learned early on is like, boy, when I kind of go for a walk after dinner, which is now like a habit with my wife, it stabilizes my blood sugar. Wow, that's kind
Mm,
of really cool. So it
yeah.
kind of, sometimes we can use these wearables to really remind us of what we already know, learn something new, and develop and refine our intuitive capacity to read the signals of the body, right? So it's like, okay, so I wake up in the morning, I'm feeling pretty good, but my kind of aura ring says, hold it a sec, your redness is not so kind of good there. And then I kind of check back in again. Oh, actually, if I'm really honest with myself, there is some tiredness there. So it's just, I like the flow and the balance between wearable and data and intuitive insight. And it should be a dance and play between the both.
Yeah. Great stuff. Um, Last question I wanted to ask you, and then we'll kind of wrap things up because I know we're
Sure.
getting close to the hour. But are there any like mitochondrial hacks? I know we were talking about like supplements like NAD. I just talked
Mm.
to some guy the other day. I never even heard of this stuff, Dr. Mark. Blue scorpion venom. I mean, the world is just so cool. All the amazing things that people are coming out with that can potentially optimize this. But are there any ones that you like specifically that you'll use that you see like backed by some evidence that look pretty good?
Yeah, PQQ is a
Yeah.
form of coenzyme Q10. That I'm a big fan of that. I also like if someone has some fundamental resilience, just hormetic stresses, right? So that's just kind of cold and heat. I mean, once you have fundamental resilience, there is no final way to upregulate mitochondrial function and periodically kind of blasting it with heat and cold. So that those are my kind of go-to. And of course, high intensity interval training as well. Just as long as though, and I always say for people who do high intensity interval training, make sure your technique is dialed in before you go for it, my friend. So that those are my kind of go tos for mitochondria. And really importantly, if you are super stressed, you got to make some shifts in the way you work, the way you live, your lifestyle, to bring the default chronic stress levels down, because your mitochondria will become stressed, become dysfunctional, and you have to reduce your stress, your inflammation. You got to dial in your nutrition, all that kind of stuff. So you got to work on that stuff alongside the supplements and the hormesis.
Yeah. Always start with the foundation. Couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. Last but not least, man, anything I didn't ask you that you wish I had? Or do you think we covered it?
Yeah, I guess a good one is, so say if someone's listening to this and they got their physical health pretty much kind of dialed in, they've already optimized the sleep, the nutrition, their exercise, they feel kind of pretty good about that. But they kind of know they struggle in relationships, or they know they have some addictions running in the background. What should I do? Okay. And I would say to you, my friend, that struggle you have is your gateway to the next level. And here's what you need to do: admit to yourself and one other human being that you're struggling, you have a problem, and ask for their help and perspective. And that will set them in the right direction.
So good. So good. Man, Dr. Mark Atkinson, I could talk to you for hours and hours on end. Last but not least, just drop everybody, remind them the school of biohacking.com, correct? That's where they can go if
Yes,
they want
that's
to
correct.
enroll. Okay. Yeah, but and then where are you active right now on social media? If they want to go to the website, go to the school of biohacking.com. Anything else though? Are you active on LinkedIn or
Yeah,
social,
LinkedIn.
Instagram?
So they can contact me through LinkedIn. They can contact me through the School of Biohacking.com. We've got a free webinar on there called Thrive Essentials. That's a 1 hour presentation from me where I cover some of these fundamentals. We've got Thrive Unlimited, which is my 35-day protocol, which really kind of guides people through the 5 pillars. That's starting in pretty soon. And then we've got the biohacking instructor program. So that is ultimately what I'm most excited about. I think it's going to be super popular. So if you've ever wanted to kind of take your passion, enthusiasm for biohacking and work as a coach or instructor and teach groups or individuals, that's something for sure to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Mark, appreciate you so much, brother. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure.